What if war is not a failure of humanity, but its purest expression? Every time we say never again, the world prepares for the next war. The United States officially entered the war between Israel and Iran, not with words, but with steel. Missiles struck Iranian nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, not whispers, any more thunder. And yet, this doesn't feel new. It feels ancient, like something buried deep in the human soul just woke up again. Have you ever noticed how war seduces even the most civilized societies? How headlines shift from peace to pride, from reason to rage almost overnight? What if we're not evolving past violence, but just refining it? Nietzsche once warned us, behind every moral declaration, there's a hidden instinct, not peace, not love, but power. This were Israel, Iran, and now the full force of the United States is not just politics, it's not just defense, it's something older, something darker. It's the will to power, unfolding in real time. Because humans don't just want to survive, we want to dominate, to win, to shape reality in our image of it, if it means annihilation. Ask yourself this: what makes entire nations choose death over negotiation? What makes young soldiers walk into fire with pride? What makes war feel sacred? Maybe it's because war reveals something we desperately hide, not our weakness, but our nature. And maybe the real danger isn't the bombs, it's our belief that we're beyond them. What if war is not a mistake we keep making, but a mirror we refuse to look into? In the early hours of June 22nd, 2025, the silence shattered. US forces struck deep into Iranian territory, not covertly, not symbolically, but with precision airstrikes on 3 major nuclear sites. The message was clear. This is no longer a proxy conflict. This is war. The images flooded the world. Glowing skies over Isfahan, chaotic evacuations in Natanz, silent dread from Fordo's underground facilities. And yet, behind the explosions, something more chilling echoed the historical inevitability of it all. Israel and Iran have been locked in psychological warfare for decades. Intelligence, drones, sabotage, a cold tension that pulsed beneath the surface. Until now, this conflict is not just about borders or bombs. It's about identity, existence, memory. Taught for Israel, surrounded by hostile rhetoric, every threat feels existential. For Iran, long demonized and sanctioned, resistance is almost a cultural virtue. Add the United States armed, ideological, omnipresent, and you ignite a mythic battle, not just East versus West, but fear versus pride, shame versus retaliation, history versus survival. Nietzsche called this kind of conflict Dionysia, raw force that overwhelms order. When law collapses under the weight of instinct, when reason bows to rage, and still the world watches half horrified, half hypnotized, because deep down something in us is drawn to this spectacle, not out of cruelty but recognition. We sense that this is more than geopolitics. It's a stage where nations act out their suppressed archetypes of heroism, vengeance, sacrifice, ancient scripts written in modern fire. No declaration can stop it, no summit can contain it, because when war becomes sacred, it ceases to be negotiable. And perhaps the most dangerous myth of all is that we're in control. To Nietzsche, the world was not governed by logic or peace, but by a force deeper, more primal, the will to power, not just political power, not military might, but the raw drive to assert one's existence, to impose form onto chaos, to create meaning where none exists even if it costs everything. In this view, war is not an accident. It is a manifestation, a consequence of clashing wills, each refusing to surrender, each screaming into the abyss, "I will not be erased." When the United States strikes Iranian nuclear sites, when Israel defends itself against what it sees as existential threats, when Iran responds with fire rather than concession, this isn't random. It's the will to power taking form, not in ivory towers, but in missile silos and military briefings. For Nietzsche, peace is never neutral. It's often a temporary illusion, maintained by the strong to preserve their structure, or by the weak to regroup. But beneath it, the storm waits. He wrote, "Life itself is essentially appropriation, injury, conquest of the strange and weak." A harsh truth, one we often cover with moral language, defense, justice, human rights. But Nietzsche would strip those away and ask, what if morality is just another weapon? Another mask? When nations claim they're fighting for peace, he'd smirk. Because even peace, he believed, is just another battlefield, another way of winning. In the Middle East today, we are not witnessing chaos, we are witnessing clarity. The will to power unleashed, unfiltered, unapologetic, not good, not evil, but real, uncomfortable, and perhaps necessary. So here's the question Nietzsche forces us to ask. Do we really want peace? Or do we just want to win without guilt? Because the will to power doesn't care for innocence. It only asks, how far will you go to be heard? Every war tells a story of good versus evil. Every government claims the higher ground. Every missile is baptized with justification. Every bomb drops with a sermon behind it. But Nietzsche warned us, morality is not universal. It's constructed, forged in the fire of culture, power, and fear. He called it master morality versus slave morality. In the former, the strong define virtue through strength, honor, courage. In the latter, the powerless redefine virtue as humility, obedience, and pity. Both moralities are not truths. They are strategies. So when the US defends its strike on Iran as preservation of peace, and Iran calls it imperial aggression, Nietzsche wouldn't choose a side. He'd say, these are just competing fictions, each designed to preserve identity and justify dominance. Good and evil, in this context, are tools, not truths. Israel frames its campaign as self-defense. Iran frames its retaliation as resistance. But strip away the flags, the anthems, the speeches, and what remains? Fear. And fear always seeks a moral frame to mask its rawness. That's why modern warfare needs propaganda, not just to persuade others, but to convince ourselves, to believe that we are the righteous hand of history, not just another actor in its violence. But what if no one is right? What if war is not a battle between light and darkness, but between two lights that blind? Nietzsche challenges us to abandon moral comfort and stare directly at the abyss, to see that behind every noble cause there may lie resentment, ambition, or instinct, not because humans are evil, but because we are layered, and in war, those layers peel back. So ask yourself, how much of your moral outrage is yours, and how much was given to you? Do you support a side because of truth or because of tribe? Because in every war, the most dangerous weapons are not drones or bombs, they are narratives. Some wars don't start with bombs, they begin in memory. Long before a missile is launched, a wound festers. a humiliation, an exile, a betrayal passed from father to son, from grandmother to child, until one day the pain becomes identity. Nietzsche called it ressentiment, not just resentment, but a deep, historical bitterness that shapes morality itself. A moral code built not from strength, but from suffering. He saw it especially in those who had been conquered, shamed, or sidelined, could not act, so they judged, who could not dominate, so they redefined virtue as weakness. Over time, this internalized fury becomes doctrine, and war becomes inevitable. Look at the Middle East. Look at Iran, its history riddled with invasions, its pride forged in defiance, a nation that remembers Mossadegh sanctions, sabotage. For many Iranians, resisting the West is not just policy, it's dignity. Look at Israel, a people marked by the Holocaust, centuries of diaspora and persecution. For many Israelis, vigilance is not aggression, it's survival. To peoples, to wounds, to mirrors of each other. And now, the United States enters a nation whose global identity is built on action, not reflection. It sees the world in terms of threats and solutions. But what if these are not problems to be solved, but ghosts to be understood? Because ressentiment doesn't fade with treaties. It simmers, it distorts, it whispers, "You owe me." It insists, "They must suffer like we did." And so, we justify the unthinkable, not because we're evil, but because pain, unprocessed, becomes prophecy. Nietzsche feared this most, not the strong who dominate, but the wounded who moralize, who turn pain into purity and vengeance into virtue. So, we must ask, are today's bombs simply yesterday's trauma repackaged? And if we don't break this chain of ancestral rage, who will inherit the next missile? What if this war has happened before? Not in the same places, not with the same names, but in essence, what if history isn't a line but a spiral? Nietzsche believed in the eternal returner, haunting idea that everything repeats. Every choice, every pain, every war destined to recur endlessly. It's not superstition, it's a confrontation. Because if everything must repeat, then every moment matters infinitely. Every act echoes through eternity. So, when we witness war Israel-Iran, America, we are not just watching politics, we are watching a pattern, a rhythm, that humans can't seem to escape. The rise of fear, the eruption of violence, the ashes of regret, and then silence, until it starts again. Nietzsche didn't present this idea to depress us. He presented it as a mirror, a challenge. Would you live this life again and again, exactly as it is? If not, why are you living it at all? In war, this question becomes unbearable, because the same speeches are made, the same graves are dug, the same children learn to hate. So ask yourself, how many times must we kill the same enemy before we realize they were never the enemy? How many ruins must we build upon before we admit we worship destruction? Because war has a strange alchemy. It turns chaos into order, destruction into identity, loss into purpose, but it also traps us forever reacting, never transforming. Nietzsche hoped that through embracing the eternal return, we might finally break the cycle, not by denying war, but by outgrowing it, not by condemning power, but by transcending our need to dominate. And so the final question is not, will this war end, but rather, will we ever stop repeating it? What if the final battlefield is not out there, but within? War is not just fought with missiles and men, it's fought in the soul, in the stories we tell ourselves, in the enemies we invent to avoid confronting our own contradictions. Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." This war, Israel, Iran, the United States, is not an anomaly. It is a revelation. It shows us who we really are when the masks fall. And maybe that's what frightens us most. Not the death, but the truth. That beneath all our civilization, our progress, our rhetoric, we are still tribal, territorial, afraid. Still addicted to the illusion of control. Still desperate to make pain meaningful, even if it means passing it on. But there is a quiet rebellion that Nietzsche never abandoned. A rebellion of becoming, of refusing to be swallowed by old patterns, of rising, not through conquest, but through consciousness, because power is inevitable. But how we use it, that is our choice. You are not powerless in this story. Every time you question a narrative, every time you refuse to dehumanize, every time you see the other not as enemy but as mirror, you fracture the eternal return, just a little, and maybe that's enough to begin. Again, not with vengeance, but with vision, because true power is not in domination, it's in the courage to evolve. So ask yourself now, what war still lives in you? And when the next one comes, will you repeat, or will you rise? If this touched something within you, subscribe, share, and watch the next video for more current and philosophical reflections.